Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my partner in crime, Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. Wes, it will be a Sunday night football kickoff in prime time at Lambeau Field. It's going to be cold. They're talking single-digit temperatures at kickoff. But rewind a little over a month, and we were talking about a Vikings team that plays a lot of close games. They win some, they lose some. They're right around 500. Well, here we are with 2 weeks to go in the regular season, and the Vikings haven't changed. They still play a lot of close games, and whether they lose on the last play of the game to the Detroit Lions or whether they nearly blow a 29-0 lead to the Pittsburgh Steelers but barely hang on for the victory, it seems like this is still the same Minnesota Vikings team. This has been their MO all season long.
Yeah, and unfortunately for the Vikings, the past few seasons have kind of followed this similar trend. And let's be honest, Mike, it's not an anomaly when it happens that often. They're inconsistent. They're extremely talented. They have the best young receiver in the game. Kirk Cousins can look like an all-pro at times. And certainly, as we've talked about time and time again, Mike, Dalvin Cook is a real threat in the run game.
Yeah.
But defensively, there's been some erosion there the past few seasons. And when they need to come up with clutch performances or beat teams that they should beat to be a playoff contender, they just haven't been able to do it. All that being said, this is not a team you can take for granted at 7-8 coming in here at Lambeau Field. They're very dangerous. They're very dynamic on both sides of the ball. And as the Green Bay Packers saw at US Bank Stadium, if you don't capitalize on your opportunities against Cousins and company, you are going to find a way to lose that football game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these two teams played a shootout at US Bank Stadium back in November. I don't know in single-digit temperatures if we're going to see the same type of offensive fireworks come Sunday night, but for the Minnesota Vikings, and this is what I've been saying in following them most of the season, they're an extremely dangerous offense when they've had their big three as far as their offensive weapons healthy and able to play. And I'm talking about Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, and Adam Thielen. Now, they just put Adam Thielen on injured reserve with an ankle injury. Apparently he had to undergo surgery after re-aggravating an ankle injury in the Vikings' previous game. So they don't have the big three. They have Jefferson. They have Cook. It just seems to me that offensively they haven't been the same when one of those three guys has been missing.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, Jefferson is really becoming a dynamic force in this league, and unfortunately for the Packers, they're going to have to deal with him for some time in the NFC North, much like the Packers of the late 90s and 2000s had to deal with Randy Moss in the NFC Central. It's just a reality of it. But as you said, the problem beyond Jefferson has been getting Thielen and Cook both healthy and available. You saw it last week with Thielen, how frustrated he was, how frustrating this year has been for him, because when he has been healthy, he has been really good in this offense, and the Packers saw some of that. But to lose him now with this ankle injury, which, in the long run will help him, get him back, is there bigger aspirations out there for the Vikings in 2022? I would think so. But to not have him on Sunday is going to be really interesting, because he is, as big play born is Jefferson in terms of his ability to generate, game explosive type moments. Thielen is the guy that moves the chains for them, and I think could be a real force in this game at Lambeau Field in colder temperatures. The running game, we know what they can do. You've seen it with Cook, and you've seen it with Madsen too. When he's been available, and he's had to be the guy, he's been able to play up to that. Now, his numbers aren't as extraordinary as Cook's are, but he's consistent. So I feel like those two elements are going to be really interesting to track here. As we'll talk about with the Packers, I mean, A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, the same problem that the Vikings and the issues that they've had defensively, they're going to have to contend with. But I still think Jefferson is going to be a guy that Green Bay is going to have to keep an eye on and could potentially be a game breaker here. But if you can't contain Cook and he goes off in a similar fashion like, this past week, what happened with Nick Chubb, it's going to be a long evening at Lambeau Field.
Yeah, absolutely. The Packers know what this Viking offense looks like when Dalvin Cook gets rolling, and this Packers defense is trying to figure out exactly what it needs to do to start clamping down on the run after what has happened the past couple weeks, particularly with Chubb. On the defensive side of the ball, for Minnesota, really hard to figure out in some respects, because this is a unit that has 44 sacks on the season, which is tied for first, I believe, in the NFC with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They have 5 guys on their team, not all of them active. Some of them are injured and not
Danielle
playing.
Hunter's still their leading sacker.
Yeah, but they have 5 guys who have recorded 5 or more sacks this year. That's not easy to do. And as much as you have the old mainstays in the middle of this defense in Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr and Harrison Smith, there's just been so much up and down inconsistent play elsewhere, particularly in the coverage aspect of things at cornerback. They're playing with young cornerbacks. There was some sort of a blow-up with Bashad Breeland and the coaches in practice a couple weeks ago, and they just flat out released him. It doesn't look like a Mike Zimmer defense, except for those occasions, and we saw last week against the Rams, except for those occasions when an Anthony Barr or an Eric Kendricks or a Harrison Smith is making a big play that can suddenly change a game. And that's how the Vikings stayed in it against the Rams last week. The interceptions they got against Matthew Stafford with their main guys. But if those guys aren't stepping up and making big plays, this just strikes me as a very ordinary defense.
I've said it time and time again. I really respect Rick Spielman. I love what they've built there in Minnesota. I don't think him and Zimmer get nearly enough credit for how competitive this team has been for the better part of a decade now. But what happened in the secondary, and obviously more specifically the cornerback position, Harrison Smith's still one of the best in the game. I'm a huge fan of Xavier Woods, and he's made some big plays for them this season. But I don't know what you think about this, but I kind of look at their cornerback scenario is sort of where the Packers were in 2013 with their safeties.
Yeah.
They made it a big, abrupt shift, but the plan hasn't really come together, so to speak.
I would agree.
Now, some of that's out of their control. You know, Jeff Gladney, these issues they've had, you know, with some of these draft picks, they did what was best for their team moving forward. But the fact of the matter is you still didn't hit on those positions. And Xavier Rhodes is a different type of player at this time. Trey Waynes, different type of player. I understood their reasons for the direction they went. But if you're going to go that direction, what's the next plan? What's the next step? That's where they've been lacking. And as good as they are in the linebacker unit, as good as they are on the back end with their safeties, the issues of trying to figure out what their defensive front is going to look like and what the cornerbacks are going to look like, I think has been one of the undoings for Minnesota for these last 2 seasons.
Yeah, well, as far as the Packers are concerned, the questions that are lingering out here for this game mostly hinge on where things are with the COVID list, right?
Yeah.
Because the Packers have, over the last week plus, they put a bunch of guys on the reserve COVID-19 list, but the NFL has changed the protocols and the return to play rules in terms of the length of time that players need to be out after they test positive, all this. And I'm going to confess, Wes, the rules have changed like so much, it's hard for me to keep track of exactly how this is going to work. But one area I think that's worth talking about here that the Packers are entering this game, I think, with a lot of uncertainty is on special teams, because you have both Amari Rodgers, who's been your primary return man, and Corey Bojorquez, your punter and your holder for Mason Crosby. Both of those guys are on the COVID list. Now, it's possible that they could come back and be able to play on Sunday night. It's also possible that they won't. And this is just at the time when the Packers special teams that have gone through obviously a lot of struggles throughout the course of the year seem to be finally maybe settling down a little bit. But now you have this uncertainty with your personnel to deal with.
So many times in this business, we have to just kind of read the tea leaves, right? And at the time in which we're taping this could change in an hour. But at the time in which we're taping this, the Packers have not made a move at punter. They do not have a backup punter right now at this point in time. The holding situation, well, the backup holder is Randall Cobb. He's not available either.
Right.
Does that mean that would be Jordan Love? Could that be J.J. Molson, the backup kicker? You just don't know. But the fact that Green Bay at this very moment on Thursday, at which we're taping this, have not made a move at punter would make you believe that there might be some hope there that Corey Bojorquez will be available for Sunday. Reportedly, he would fit inside that timeline to be allowed to play on Sunday. It still is a challenge. And the other thing that I think so many times gets lost is we automatically shift to, well, it's 5 days, it's 10 days. They'll be ready, they'll be good to go. Then you listen to what Kenny Clark had to say on Wednesday about how rough his bout with COVID was, because the question was kind of asked to him, like, hey, could you have, potentially played with this new thing? And Kenny's answer wasn't whether or not he was going to play. It was, yeah, I had 3 days where I felt really bad and I had a bad cough and all these things. We got to think about the player. We have to think about the person, though, first.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's where this is going to come down to. To have 15 guys with the COVID reserve list, people were kind of writing at me about, Jair Alexander. It's very exciting that Jair Alexander was activated on Wednesday. And I didn't want to be Debbie Downer to everybody. But it's like, listen, guys, that was the last day of his window, and the Packers presently have 9 spots open on their 53-man roster. Jair Alexander was going to get activated. So we already saw Cole Van Lanen's been promoted for this week as a COVID replacement. We might see even more potential, practice squad players have to be called upon too. It's the nature of the beast. As far as the returners, as weird as this sounds, I don't really have a ton of concern there because we've seen multiple times for multiple seasons, Chandon Sullivan can step in, whether it be kickoffs or punt returns. He's done both now for Green Bay in a pinch, not just what he did a couple weeks ago, but even going back 2 seasons. So they have Sullivan. Patrick Taylor could be called upon there too. So I think they're okay in that regard. The big thing is going to be about Horkes, though. As a holder, as a punter, as a Pro Bowl alternate, the guy's brought a lot to Green Bay, and it really hurt this football team not to have him.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to get to our keys to victory for this game, but first, Wes, a little bit of sponsor business. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, we believe in better. Keys to victory here for the Packers to emerge from Sunday Night Football with another win. It's stating the obvious, but based on what happened last week, we sat here and talked about how you can't let Nick Chubb dictate the tempo and control the game and give the Browns the opportunity to score as many points as they did. It's the same thing here. And I know Justin Jefferson is better than any wide receiver the Cleveland Browns put on the field on Christmas Day at Lambeau. But it still has to start with containing Dalvin Cook, because if he is in command out there, that's going to make for a really, really tough day for Green Bay's defense.
That's what's interesting. What you said, though, is about not allowing Nick Chubb to dictate the terms of the game. Nick Chubb didn't dictate the terms of the game. Now, how much of that was on Cleveland and their game plan?
Right.
How much of that was on Green Bay? The reason why Green Bay got off to the start it did in that game was because of how that first half played out in the unwillingness for the Browns to commit to Chubb for whatever reason. That's not going to be the case on Sunday.
I agree.
The Minnesota Vikings are going to try to run this thing through Cook, and at times Madison too. So that will be pivotal. But to me, Mike, it's very simple. You're talking about this and you're writing about this, but this is going to be a really cold game. Barring some kind of crazy front that moves in, we're all anticipating it's going to be one of the coldest in this series. The Packers play at Lambeau Field. They are undefeated in the month of December at Lambeau Field underneath Matt LaFleur. The Minnesota Vikings play in a dome. They won their game at US Bank Stadium partially based upon the fact that they were at home. Green Bay needs to defend its turf. The Packers are 1 game up right now in the conference. They have 2 divisional games against the Minnesota Vikings and the Detroit Lions. If we were back in week 1, maybe even after that loss to New Orleans, and we said, this is the scenario that's going to play out for you this season. This is the optimal scenario for Green Bay.
No question about it.
You have to defend your place. And if it's 0 degrees, if it's minus 10 degrees, if there's no even, water in the stadium available, you have to be able to cultivate, harness that ability, and come out victorious. I think that's what it comes down to. So yes, a lot of it's the run, but a lot of it's how they play defensively. A lot of it is what kind of energy do you have left in the fourth quarter when you don't want to be out there anymore.
Yeah.
That's going to be the real challenge for this matchup. You have to imagine the Minnesota Vikings, they're going to do everything they can to try to replicate these elements this week, but you're not going to be able to do it. Sunday's going to be too much of a different animal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very curious to see, because we've seen the Packers. Aaron Rodgers has played in plenty of these games. He's played in the cold. He's played in the cold without some of his best weapons on offense, and the Packers have functioned very well offensively. I'm curious to see what Kirk Cousins and this Vikings passing offense, assuming the Packers can do enough against Cook to make the Vikings have to throw the ball in key situations. What's this Vikings passing offense going to look like in single-degree temperatures? Because I remember before the first meeting this season, we were talking about how going into that game, Kirk Cousins had thrown only 2 interceptions all season long. And in the controlled climate of US Bank Stadium indoors, the Packers legitimately had opportunities for 4 interceptions in that game, right? Including one right at the very end that could have turned the tide and given the Packers a walk-off victory instead of a walk-off defeat. If the weather has the impact on the passing game that I think it could have for the Vikings, I think the Packers are going to get some opportunities against Kirk Cousins, and you've got to take advantage of them. You have to catch the ball. You have to make him pay for his bad passes, because Kirk Cousins was going to be the GOAT at US Bank Stadium back in November with the number of balls he put in range for the Packers to intercept, and he ended up being the hero.
He ended up being the GOAT.
And I think that's something that the Packers have to turn the tables in that regard in this game.
Absolutely, and the other aspect of this that I'm just curious to see how it plays out. I don't know if it's a key to victory. I don't know what we're going to see is, like, how much cover 2 is there going to be out there? Because, yes, a lot of teams want to do that. A lot of teams want to give more coverage to Devontae Adams, and maybe they still will. But you would think the strong safety will be creeping into the box a little bit more in this game. And furthermore, this is the perfect West Coast offense type of game too. And you obviously have Kubiak there now in Minnesota, the Sun, and then certainly what Matt LaFleur does. This seems to be a game too where you could get back to some of those principles. Marquez Valdez-Scantling could be back as he works his way back off the COVID list.
Right.
He could still end up being a home run threat. It's weird when you get 2 teams that are going to have an entire week to prepare for single-digit temperatures to try to figure out what is going to be the best game plan for their offense in this elements. And then to close on this really quickly, how neat is it too, Mike? And you've covered so many, sunsets, and you've seen so many seasons now for the Packers. How cool is it when you get to the point where now we are talking about, well, this defense could look different with Rashawn Gary on the field after he wasn't there last month. A guy that had 7 sacks his first 2 seasons, was playing 33% of the defensive snaps. Now he becomes a core player for Green Bay. It hurt this defense not having him on the field last month in that matchup against the Vikings when they did have trouble getting after Kirk Cousins.
Yep.
Well, he's back now. Preston Smith has 6 sacks in 6 games. Again, it's Packers-Vikings. The rivalry sells itself. The narratives are right there to be had. The storylines are all over the place. But what these 2 teams are going to bring out in the field on Sunday night makes it a really compelling matchup to me.
Yeah. Well, rivalry portions of things aside, looking at the playoff picture, there are scenarios that are important to both teams here, starting with Green Bay, as we touched on our last episode. If the Dallas Cowboys lose late Sunday afternoon to the Arizona Cardinals, the Packers will take the field Sunday night with a chance to lock up the number 1 seed and clinch it with 1 week left to go. If the Cowboys win, the Packers need to win to maintain their advantage, because if the Cowboys win and the Packers lose and those 2 teams are tied for the best record, the Cowboys are the ones with the tiebreaker. From Minnesota's point of view, the Vikings are 7-8. They're within a group of 5 or 6 teams that are fighting for the last 2 wildcard spots, the 6 and 7 spots in the NFC. The scoreboard watching that the Vikings fans will be doing, Houston is at San Francisco, Philadelphia is at Washington. If the 49ers and the Eagles both win, the Vikings are essentially playing for their season on Sunday night. They would have to beat the Packers. If the Niners and the Eagles both win, the Vikings would have to beat the Packers in order to stay alive in that wild card chase heading into Week 18. So if San Francisco and Philadelphia win, regardless of what happens with Dallas, the Packers could be in a position to end their NFC North rivals season and knock them out for good in 2021. So some interesting scenarios to ponder, with the game being at night and everything else that happens during the day, will lead to, okay, what exactly is on the line at 7:20 when the ball kicks off?
Yeah, and as we talked about earlier this week on our first show, the fact that you have Dallas and Arizona, two teams who are heading in very different directions right now. Dallas is feeling like, it's the king of the world.
Oh, yeah.
With how that matchup played out against Washington. Washington, which at a time looked like they could potentially be a kind of an underdog playoff hopeful to, they're basically out of it. And then the other side of things, you have Arizona that needs to be able to get some momentum back here if it's really going to be able to put together a playoff bid. Green Bay sitting in the driver's seat here at 12-3, they're in a good spot because they don't have to worry about all that. If you do take care of business in the North, you do get the first round bye. You are the number 1 seed in a much different looking playoff scenario than it was a year ago when fans were just getting reintroduced, especially in Green Bay, back into stadiums. I think that can be a huge catalyst for them, a huge push for them. For Minnesota, the thing that I have to imagine Mike Zimmer's message is going to be this week is you guys have actually played in these games. Nobody wants to see the Minnesota Vikings in January because they know in any given week they can beat anybody in that NFC field. So, yeah, the stakes are really high. You almost wish in a way, this is going to be the 5th year out of 6 that they're going to be playing Detroit in the finale. You almost wonder why the NFL has just not, why they haven't tried to incorporate the Vikings more into those last week scenarios, because this could have been really interesting theater if they'd have switched things around. But be that as it may, the Packers just have to take care of business, and the conference is theirs.
Yeah. One last thought before we go. I know we don't talk much about the AFC on this show and some of those matchups, but
it's on our other show.
I have to just get your thoughts on what I think is a really intriguing AFC matchup here on Sunday. Believe it's in the early time slot. Kansas City at Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Joe Burrow, 525 passing yards last week. The Bengals will have that offense at home going against the Kansas City Chiefs team that has won, 7 or 8 in a row?
Yeah.
I think whatever their winning streak is, where the Chiefs have gone from actually being below 500 at 3-4 when the Packers visited Arrowhead Stadium to now the Chiefs are the ones in the driver's seat for the number 1 seed in the bye in the AFC. This is a really interesting and a potential playoff preview type of game.
In getting back to what we were talking about before with teams that nobody wants to face right now, Kansas City's as hot as it comes.
Oh, yeah.
The thing is, I don't think anyone was under any disillusions. I mean, you understand how good Patrick Mahomes is and how much he's going to affect the game. But they were going through a rough spot, and they figured it out.
Yep.
It happens. To win 8 in a row now to put themselves in this spot is great. And I'll tell you what, man, between what Tua has done in Miami to bring back the Dolphins and actually give them some playoff hopes now, that rookie class from a year ago, you're seeing the maturation with it. Justin Herbert, they had a bad loss last week, but certainly appears to be the answer there for the Chargers long term. Baltimore, who was right up there with everyone, well, now they've fallen off, and now they're on the outside looking in. The real interesting test for Cincinnati is how much have they grown from the team that I think everybody thought was going to be a real darling this year to a team that can you go and knock off the 2-time defending AFC champion.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate test. And with all due respect to Burrow, this is going to be a much different type of defense than what he saw a week ago. Is feeling a lot better about itself right now than where the Ravens are at. So, we won't be able to watch it, but it'll be fun to actually to see exactly how that thing plays out.
Yeah, all right. Well, with that, we will call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team and everything with Sunday night's game. We'll have it all for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Happy New Year. We'll see you next time.